Recently, we've heard about the DisneyFox situation. Of course, we're waiting for AT&T and Time Warner. Lots going on in terms of the commercial side of the TV business world, and we've talked about disruption. You have for years. What does that new face of the television industry look like to you?
Yeah, well, I think television in particular is much more Charles Darwin than Che Guevara. It's all evolutionary more than it is revolutionary. I think from Disney's perspective, they're looking at a world where, not incorrectly, it is possible to go direct to consumer with an offering of content. And I think that they think it's a bigger deal than many others do, and they think it's a bigger deal sooner. And I think that by buying Fox or the assets from Fox that they're acquiring, potentially, they'll get many kicks at the can, so to speak, between what Sky has in several European markets, what Star has in India, obviously the consolidation of Hulu. There's a number of different initiatives that Disney will be able to experiment with and see which model of a direct-to-consumer approach works. Again, that's in addition to Disney Life in the UK, the ESPN app that they'll be launching at some point this year, and then of course the standalone Disney-branded app that they plan to launch in 2019 in the US. So I think that there's an amplification of video consumption that they're certainly pushing hard against. And from a Fox perspective, I think it's absolutely true that among the factors that they were considering in deciding to sell was they were freaked out by Facebook expressing a willingness to bid $600 million for 5 years of India cricket rights. In India, in a market with $1 billion of annual digital advertising, Facebook would have spent over $120 million a year, which is astronomical. And if you're a Fox and you're looking at what Facebook is willing to do in India, well, what are they willing to do in the US if that's the scale at which they're willing to operate? And so I think there's an appreciation for the consequences of Facebook, Google, Amazon, and even Apple pushing harder into the same space. Now, my take on this is that there is room for all of them potentially, but margins will be lower. I don't think there's anything that anyone can do about that. I think that notions of peak TV is suggesting that all of a sudden everyone will come to their senses and reduce their output. I don't believe that. I think there will only be more and more higher quality content. More and more money will be spent on it. It means an amazing range of content for consumers, but it also means less profitability for those who make it.
I want to talk about television and advertising in the sort of world of cord cutters and fragmentation, the upside, the downside, and where things might be going.
Yeah, so I think that the budgets that go to advertising on television are largely independent of the supply of inventory. That is to say that if there was, say, 10% less sufficiently premium video inventory, it wouldn't have any impact on the amount of spending by itself. As long as television is the worst form of advertising except for all those others which have been tried, and it mostly is for large brands which are building or sustaining their brands, and there is no next best alternative, the money will be what the money is. It just gets reconcentrated into different inventory. So cord cutting, if it means a reduction of consumption, or it means, as it's often associated with a rise of use of the SVOD services that don't have advertisements, I think it just leads to a reconcentration of ad budgets. It's a separate issue as to what the health is of the 200 advertisers who are 90% of network TV advertising, 60% of all TV. They're pretty weak collectively, and the new brands that are emerging, ironically, from Google or Amazon selling their personal assistants, for example, aren't necessarily growing enough to compensate for the weakness that those larger brands have.
And finally, the future of the holding company. I know you've written about this and you have a lot of thoughts, and also their competitive space with the consulting firms, and how do you see the year ahead?
So I think that the agency holding companies are going through a difficult time right now. We have a lot of what I like to call enhanced fee scrutiny, where marketers are studying their contracts more aggressively than they ever have before, because they now understand that there's a lot in them that they just didn't understand. And that, I think, is having an effect, curtailing growth of the holding companies. Zero-based budgeting and the increased application of procurement-based methodologies to how they assess fees, also having an impact. In-housing on the margins of content studios, and also another negative effect. The consultancies, not so much. There is some competitive overlap for a small subset of the holding company's business, but it is not having a meaningful impact at this point in time. If anything, it does point the way to where there is growth for professional services that are associated with marketing, and to some large degree, I think the holding companies know that, and they're already investing against it. So I think that you see the holding companies and the IT services or consulting firms increasingly competing with each other in a subset of the overall industry. But until you see an Accenture or a Capgemini or someone actually acquiring a holding company or something much bigger, it's not that big of a difference from what agencies always face.